Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Gamble killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet podcast. As always, I'm your host John, also known as Forty20. Joining me to break down another week of Jersey Flegg football as they march deep into the finals, as well as breaking down the happenings in the NRLW and the general NRL are my good mates Sixties and Clint. Fellas, good to have you on board. And geez, those Jersey Flegg boys, they're flying high.
Well, John, if we can't have the NRL team flying the flag for the Eels in finals football, we can at least be looking to the Jersey Flegg team because they are doing an outstanding job. I think they've won something like 9 of their last 10 games, something like that in this late season run. And even though they didn't play their best match on the weekend, they got the victory, a finals victory, and as you say, it's preliminary final this week. So grand final qualifier, back out at Leichhardt Oval. Can't wait to see it, mate.
And Clint, how have you been since we had the chat last Tuesday, mate?
Yeah, look, it's all aboard the Jersey Flegg train at the minute, isn't it? You know, great to see those boys going well, and hopefully they can keep it going. We said last week their biggest enemy and the biggest hurdle will be themselves, and it was a far from pretty victory that we'll get into very shortly against Cronulla, but they got the job done, and the season continues. And
before I hand the keys over to you, Sixties, as always, a quick shout out to the two sponsors of our show, Big Swing Golf, North Mead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta, helping us get you guys the podcast each and every episode. And now, let's talk some news.
News team, assemble!
Well, we were just touching on the Eels Jersey Flegg team, so let's open up by talking very quickly about last week's victory over the Cronulla Sharks. It was a 20-6 victory against the team, I think, that came in third place in the regular rounds. That means the Eels will this week be lining up against the minor premiers who went down to the Bulldogs last week. That's the Roosters, their opponents this week. Fellas, it was, as Clint just said, it wasn't a pretty victory. We had the team probably didn't exactly stick to the match plan, but they got the job done. And I think it was possibly a matter of winning the key moments that mattered throughout the game without dominating. Every time there was a big moment, either the Eels came up with the right play or the Sharks couldn't come up with the right play. What do you think? Fair call, John?
Yeah. It was a case of doing just enough, I suppose, and getting in our own way a fair bit throughout the course of this game. And, you know, Quentin mentioned it, but last week he spoke about how it felt like the only thing that could really stop the Parramatta Eels in this big run was themselves, and we saw that. You know, Cronulla, they're a good team. Top 4 finishers, like you said, 60s, but the Eels, even out of gear like they were, could handle them quite comfortably, and the only looks they really got were on the back of Parramatta errors.
Yeah, absolutely. And Clint, there was no shortage of errors that were there, but by the same token, the Sharks missed their opportunity, even from the kickoff. Like the Eels had a sort of shortish kickoff. The ball bounced awkwardly. The kick chasers from the kickoff sort of ran past the ball, and then the Sharks found themselves strangely in open pastures, and what should have been the final pass around halfway for a try went astray, went over the sideline. I think, you know, the Eels got lucky right from the kickoff there.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to touch on that moment off the kickoff, and you know, anyone who's familiar with the work of Sam Stonestreet in the lower grades, both New South Wales Cup and Flegg for Cronulla, knows that he's an absolute flyer who would have finished that put the glasses down Champagne Rugby League moment, and you know, which would have been an awful start. You know, I think that moment probably is a good indicator of the game that followed. Is that there was a couple of little scares, but ultimately it didn't eventuate to anything. But regardless of the boys being far from their best, they still controlled 60% of possession, and Cronulla themselves, they struggled to hold the ball even more so. I'm quite surprised the stat line for our boys reached an 82% completion rate, because it didn't quite feel that way.
There were a lot of penalties, I think, that would have completed sets for the Parramatta Eels.
Yeah, and it probably skewed the stats as a result, 40. But the fact of the matter is with that possession, they comfortably won the yardage game, and they're forcing the Sharks to defend a further 8 minutes more than themselves, and holding the ball matters in all games of rugby league, but even more so in finals footy. And winning those little moments and getting the tries when it mattered ultimately proved the difference. I think we saw in particular some really good efforts from players like Ethan Martin. He had a really great finish for his try. Likewise, we saw a nice little move in the early exchanges to put Sam Loijau over. A special shout out as well to William Larcher. I know he scored a try, but geez, there were some really big effort moments from him throughout the match that certainly won him some admirers as well. So, far from pretty, but the job was done, and now we move on to the minor premiers.
And John, I really like the work of a couple of unsung heroes. Clint mentioned one just then in Will Latu. Big hits that he put on, the try that was scored. He and Brock Parker, I thought, were really outstanding in this match.
Yeah, no doubt, Sixties. Brock's been phenomenal all season. I think he's really found another gear throughout 2023 and really catapulted himself into the long-term NRL picture. And Latu did himself the same sort of favours this week, just past, where it looked like he brought a sledgehammer onto the field, honestly. He came out there and whacked them twice. We would have thought it was an assisted with a weapon. Like, he knocked the ball out, knocked the player over. Huge turning points in the flow of the game there on two occasions. And you could just see the boys lift on the back of that. So very well done to Will there. I think he was one of the initial batch of Queensland recruits, wasn't he, Sixties? We sort of, I think we missed that when he first joined the club, but ahead of all the boys that were in the SG Ball this year that came from Queensland, Latu was here before, I think.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, he certainly had an impact in that game. I spoke to him after the game briefly, and I gave him a bit of praise for the way that he performed in the game and the big hits, and he's a very humble bloke. That's all I'll say. I mean, his attitude was, well, like they got some big boys in that Sharks team, and he had to do his bit to to shut them down. So, but they were, you're talking about a couple of hits that were real momentum changes as well. So, really impressed with that. And Clint also mentioned Ethan Martin. There were two big moments that he had later in the game. I mean, he played a good game all round, but there was one where there was a run off the line, and he gathered the ball. I can't remember how many players he beat, but he got out past the 20-metre line, and it was all heart, that particular run. He just was refusing to be stopped. And then, of course, the try that he scored, it's I mean, we've seen a few tries already from him this year where you're looking at it and you go, well, probably only Ethan Martin scores that try. Just his pace and determination. So he's making people sit up and take notice. Again, another Queensland product, although he is actually from New Zealand. He was in the Dolphins system from memory, was he not, John?
I believe so,
yeah. I think he had an injury or something and was released out of the Dolphin system last year, I think. And then he went and returned to rugby union for a little bit or something like that. Anyway, we know that his major background is rugby union, apart from being taken on as a bit of a project by the Dolphins system. This is before the Dolphins were in the NRL. It was part of their build-up and building up their pathways. So anyway, we move on, and we'll come back to talk a little bit more about the Flegg team with Team List Tuesday news and then also our previews. Fellas, the Eels NRLW loss to the Titans, I think it's pretty well locked in the spoon. I was having a look at the draw and the table, and there's a significant points differential between
a massive win over Cronulla,
the Eels
and the Cowboys to also cop a big loss.
The Eels would have to win really big over the Sharks. I mean, let alone get a win over the Sharks, but win massively. And the Cows would have to lose big to the Roosters. Now, there is a potential for the Cows to lose big to the Roosters, but you know, we're probably asking a lot. Like, we'll be really happy if our Eels can get a win over the Sharks, and I think it's not impossible, but they can't be thinking about points differential. I think it's, unfortunately, we're probably heading towards the NRLW team getting the spoon, probably even if they do win this weekend. So, John, you have any thoughts from their performance last week?
Yeah, I think that the wear and tear of week in, week out professional football is getting to a young team. On top of the fact that they haven't been settled with their marquee players, and we just got Kennedy back and no Elsie Albert for the remainder of the season, obviously. So, a lot of young players in there. They've done really well, individually, these young girls. But, the week in, week out football takes a toll. They've played some very good teams in the last 2 weeks in the Roosters and the Titans. I just think that they'll be happy to be at the end of the tunnel. But in saying that, I think they'd also really like to sign off with a win, maybe get a bit of progress towards the upcoming preseason, I'm not sure when it'll start. It won't obviously start as early as the NRL, but finish the season on a high, take a moral victory, and use that moral victory for some momentum in the off season.
Clint, how important do you see their last performance of the season as being? And just for a bit of context, unfortunately, the team's only won 5 games in total so far across their 3 seasons of the NRLW.
Spiritually, it's important. Particularly when you consider the way that they lost to the Titans. A 34-12 scoreline flattered them. I hate to say it, but it did flatter them. There was obviously some missed kicks there from the Titans, but some of the defensive efforts, there was some shirt grabbing, and when the season's post-mortem's done, and you touched on a point there, Sixties, that I was going to raise. We've got to remind ourselves, despite being grand finalists last year, we only just crept into the finals, and the team last year took a little while to get going, and then found a little bit of fire towards the end of the season. But in the grander scheme of things, when we analyze those first 3 seasons, we have to ask the question about where it is that we really are. For the girls going into this week, as I said before, spiritually, emotionally, it'd be very important to get a win. Likewise, I think it's worth noting, obviously, with the Harvey Norman Premiership team coming in next season, how many of the girls from the NRLW squad will ply their trade in that competition leading into the NRLW next season. I think it would be important to try and get as many of them together in that side as much as possible to continue to build up some combinations. And
it's essentially a proper preseason for them.
Yeah, it's the rehearsal, right?
Yeah.
So
I think that'll be. I was just going to say, Clint, I think that's going to be the most significant factor for the Eels moving forward, is having a Harvey Norman women's team where, as John said, it becomes like a big part of their preparation for the upcoming NRLW season. Where, we've wondered about the pre-season prep for the Eels, where we've just had a slow start. And really, when you look back on it, you've got teams that groups of players that have played together, and not necessarily with the with a Harvey Norman team that goes straight into an NRLW team, but they've had combinations that have been in the same NRLW team. And I just think, it's going to be a huge piece of the puzzle for the Eels. The other thing that I'm concerned about, and it's been a concern that I've had across all of the season, is how we respond to errors, because the team will make an error, and then what we tend to see is a sequence of defence where they're constantly backpedaling, and they can make an error in attack in the red zone, and the opponents will go the length of the field in that set. And it's almost like, I don't know whether their heads go down and they lose focus in defence when it's turned over, the ball's turned over like that. But I don't know. I don't think it's my imagination that it seems to be that a lot of opponents' tries come straight on the back of an error where we don't defend an error.
No, I don't think it is your imagination, Sixties. And, you would say something like that is quite symptomatic of a young, inexperienced side playing against more seasoned opponents. Like we even think in the NRL, going back a few seasons now, when the Broncos finished with the wooden spoon, that was kind of the story of their season. They'd look like they were doing something, they'd make a mistake, and then all of a sudden they conceded a try in the next set, and then back to back following that. And then suddenly the game that they were looking competitive, it was completely blown away from them. You look to the Broncos now, and a lot of those players have become more seasoned and battle hardened, and they're the ones inflicting that damage on their opponents. So, the benefit of experience and time in the top grade has obviously served them well, and hopefully a sign of things to come.
Well, fellas, moving on now, and just before we get into Team List Tuesday, this time of year we're always dealing with plenty of signing rumours, and one of the rumours that have been flying around recently was that the Eels were pursuing the Bulldogs outside back Paul Alamotti. Well, we can put a red line through that one because he's now signed with the Penrith Panthers.
It's a good career move.
So it's we're back to square one with rumours.
Quite literally from the doghouse to the penthouse, eh?
Yes. Yeah, so it's not a bad move as far as he's concerned. Interesting too that the Bulldogs pick up some Panthers players, but now they've got that movement going the other way, and it'll be interesting to see how he develops as a player at the Panthers, because players very rarely go backwards once they head to Penrith. It's almost like what we would be used to seeing with the Storm. I guess that's what happens when you're a strong club that's really in the groove and understands their identity, which you'd have to say that the Panthers do. Just quickly before that, just on the Panthers, thoughts about their up the pars. It was probably something that's not much more than banter, but it's not something that should outrage anyone. But I don't know, given that it's Penrith and their history of taunting teams that they defeat, do you think they should maybe, I guess their CEOs felt that it wasn't quite right in, pulling it from their media and apologising to the Warriors, but should they pull their head in a bit, or is this just part of their DNA and it's why they win? I
think, and no disrespect to the Warriors, but including Penrith too, I think the whole thing's a bit cringy. The whole up the wires thing has been a bit of it was cute at first, but now it's kind of okay. And now Penrith obviously...
So you wouldn't have, if you were a Warriors supporter, you wouldn't have been over there with their set up with the TAB with the mystery tattoo? Stick the arm in the hole and get a mystery tattoo.
Yeah. Up the wires never really took for me, but more power to them for enjoying it. But it's very much on brand for Penrith, isn't it, to play the villain role here and really embrace it. And I think that's part of what fuels that team. They are a lot of great teams have a need to generate adversity and, you know, hate and, you know, sort of even vitriol to a point because it fuels them, and it feels like Penrith are really embracing that. But yeah, you know, like I said, bit cringy all around in my opinion.
Yeah, Clint.
I'm kind of Switzerland on this one. I can see it from both sides, and you know, look, personally, I just think a lot of what they, I'm referring to the Panthers when I say this, is in poor taste, and I don't mean in the sense that it's, you know, I guess completely derogatory, because you know there is room for, you know, banter in the game, and certainly between the fans, but you kind of don't want to be seeing it from the players and the or certainly in this fashion, because there's a level of respect when you're both taking that same battlefield, and you know, they to 40's point about you know, wanting to play the role of the villain, but then they subsequently want to claim tall poppy syndrome at the same time, which we've heard their players
That's
say
fair. That's fair.
at different intervals across the past. You can't have it both ways.
They do want it both ways, 100%. Yeah, they love to be able to have the last word. Essentially, you know, they want to be able to sleep.
Exactly, and you know, it's akin to bullying. You know, that's bullying and gaslighting if you look at it from that perspective. So, you know, I don't. The reason it doesn't sit well with me ultimately is because of that. You know, you can't be both. If you're the villain, go full villain and embrace the consequences of that. But don't then subsequently say that there's tall poppy syndrome and other teams are jealous. So that's what it comes like you created that lightning rod for yourself. That's what happens.
But you know what? I'm prepared to put my hand up and say I wish we had the success that the Panthers did, and I'm envious of their success. I don't hate them because they have their success. I'm not partial to our experiences that we have at Penrith Park as supporters, because I believe that there is nothing about that that's banter or good relations there. I think they have a serious crowd behaviour problem for. Well, I don't know how many other supporters of other clubs have experienced what we've been through as Eels supporters, but I've never experienced anything like that in my all my decades of going to football to a whole lot of different home grounds. It's certainly different. I think it does stem from their feelings towards the Eels. But just back to this particular matter, I don't see too much in it. Look, they based it on a fan's work that he did with the Scribe track, the Not Many If Any, and he put his own pars versus wars bit together, which the club has then embraced with that particular social media post. I think it's best left as a fan thing, because as a fan thing, you go, yeah, full marks, mate. You've done well with that. That's a bit of banter, right? That's a little bit of banter. You don't like to see the club beat an opponent and then do something like that. That's probably it's not something that you get outraged over, but you just go, yeah, did you need to?
Classless. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. And I think the CEO, to be fair, I think he recognised that, look, there's no need for that. They just played a team without their main weapon and got a victory over it. I don't think you need to gloat too much over that scenario. But, full marks, and they're heading towards another title. Jeez. As I said, would I like to be in their shoes? Yeah, 100%. Okay, so just back to the Alamottis, off to the Panthers. I don't know that there's too much that we've heard in terms of the Eels chasing anyone that's advanced in any way. I certainly haven't heard anything. I mean, we don't expect to hear anything out of the club, but you look to see if there's any sort of rumours floating around that leak from the players or from the club that they're at or from their families or friends or something like that. That tends to be how you tend to pick it up, or the player agent might put it out there that his players talking to a particular club. But fellas, I don't know. I haven't really heard too much apart from that. Anything that you've seen floating around on the forums at all, John?
Yeah, there was a little bit of not mail because it's just from online forum, but I think from a Sharks point of view, there was a bit of a chatter today that we're potentially poking around Connor Tracy. Tracy, I think, is 27 this year, which was younger than I thought. So obviously a super utility for the Sharks and capable of playing 1 through 7 pretty much, and a very, very handy player in each of those roles. Wouldn't say no to him, but again, I wouldn't say no to him, but I don't think he profiles to the sort of X-factor player that would move Quinton Gufferson out of fullback. So you'd be getting him as a centre utility, I would argue, from there.
Yep. Clint, you hearing any whispers from any forums or any mates or anything like that?
Oh, look, nothing that's concrete. It's just hearsay and speculation. I've heard Paul Moborowski's name thrown around again. But I don't think there's necessarily any credibility behind that. I think that's just 2 + 2 = 5 type of stuff that's going on around as people tend to do at this time of year when they're not hearing anything. But to that point, it wasn't until today that we knew that Paul Alamorti was going to go to Penrith. So things and decisions can happen really quickly, and I'm sure there's conversations that are going on behind the scenes. We're just, as the public, not privy to it at this point in time. And there might very well be some players that we're after or in talks with that are still playing or waiting for their seasons to officially finish. We'll just have to wait and see at this point.
Yep. Okay, John, I think we're now at the stage where we'll look at Team List Tuesday. I don't think from memory there's too much really to talk about with Team List news. We'll probably, are we really at the stage where we just go straight into the previews, because it didn't look like there was any.
We could have done a
changes.
copy and paste from last week for both teams for differing reasons.
Okay.
But the NRLW,
so
no changes there to their top 17. And then for the Jersey Flegg, no changes to their top 21 or 22. I believe that Richie Pennicini's dropped off the extended bench. Aside from that, they are as per program from last week.
Okay, well, how about we'll just launch into the preview then. So if you can run through the, we'll hit the Flegg first. If you can run through the team list there, and then we'll give our Flegg preview. Yeah,
for those that have been keeping track of the Jersey Flegg and were watching the game last week via the stream or in person, they line up the same, which means Arpa Tweedle at fullback. On the wings, Matty Komalafi and Ethan Martin, the electric Ethan Martin. In the centres, Samuel Luizu and the outstanding Blaze Talangi. Looked a little bit like Joey Manu last week, climbing up and getting that bomb and then flicking it out to Komalafi on his right. And then in the halves, Josh Lynn, Ethan Sanders, both very good. Front row, speaking of very good, Brock Parker, Jonte Jr. and Bevan Meesa. Very good bookends there. Matty Arthur, an outstanding dummy half. Jock Brazel captain the team on the left edge. Max Tupou on the right. Nick Lenars is the lock forward. On the interchange, Charlie Geimer, Sam Tuovaiti, Will Latu, he of the Sledgehammer, and then Noah Reid. Extended bench, Saxon Pryke, Lockie Blackburn, Araz Namva, and Lance for Lima. They're taking place, or this game is taking place on Saturday the 16th of September out at Leichhardt Oval. They're taking on the minor premiers, the Sydney Roosters, a team that they've actually split their last two results with. Had a tough loss the first time and then got them done the second time. So this is going to be the series sort of decider across the course of 2023 for them, and the winner getting to punch a ticket to the grand final.
Yeah, so just with that, the Roosters, I mean, they got belted by the Bulldogs last week, didn't they?
Yeah, the Jersey Flegg is a difficult competition to understand sometimes. The Roosters looked almost untouchable for the vast majority of the season, and then they got absolutely done up by the Bulldogs, who are a good team, but I would have said were a good team, not a great team for most of the season, and suddenly they found that gear.
So what are you expecting to see this week, Clint? Are we going to see, pretty much Parramatta, Jersey Flegg, Eels team 101, the formula that has been successful for them They obviously got a strong pack. The spine are outstanding. They've created opportunities for the outside backs. It's just pretty good quality rugby league, isn't it? Like they're really playing. If you take out the mistake side of it, what they try to construct is just really good rugby league.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're looking hopefully to continue that this weekend. Just less the errors that we saw against the Sharks, and probably a little bit more control defensively. I mean, this Roosters side will certainly ask a lot more questions of the defensive line than what Cronulla or Penrith have in the previous fortnight. So there's going to have to be. I mean, rugby league is a game that's played both sides of the ball, but for our boys, even more so, and especially so this weekend. So, they were the best team for the better part of this year, the Roosters, and they'll be keen to make amends for missing out on a path straight to the grand final. So, this will be a tough contest for the boys, but there is also to the point that we've been echoing the past couple of weeks, they're only real hurdles themselves, and if they turn up and they keep that they keep control throughout the middle third and earn the right to use the football and play some footy, then they should be strong enough to overcome their opponents.
And John, we got a familiar face in the Roosters team in Caleb Towie at lock for the Roosters. He's a former Eels player who went and spent last season down with the Raiders, and he now returns to Sydney, but he returns via the Sydney Roosters. He had a very strong game in the match up at St Mary's where the Roosters were victorious. Their forwards were really impressive that day, but it was one of the highest quality matches that I'd seen up to that point of the season. And I thought the Eels were a little bit unlucky on that day. Not so much, maybe unlucky is the wrong word, but it was one of those games where a couple of errors were costly. And then the return match at Ringrose Park, my goodness, that was probably the Eels' best performance of the season. And bizarrely, it came with a number of the Eels' best that were elevated to New South Wales Cup that particular weekend.
We almost had that game just get our pencil down as a loss, didn't we? In a must-win clash, saying that fair play to the club, they're prioritising senior development over going further in the flag. But to the boys' credit, they just rallied magnificently in that game and got the job done, and that was what really carried them into the finals and gave them the chance to beat both the Panthers and the Sharks then. So, yeah, that was a very, very big one. And, yeah, I mean, good to see Caleb doing well. I've always had plenty of time for him, and, seeing him go to the Raiders year before was, frustrating, but good to see him doing well at the Roosters. Do hope he has a shocker on Saturday, but that's nothing personal against Caleb. That's purely with the blue and gold specs on. This is going to be a great one, and you can catch it via three ways. You can obviously be there live in person out at Leichhardt Oval. There'll be a New South Wales Rugby League TV live stream on Facebook, and on TCT we'll have the live updates.
Yeah, well, we're certainly planning to be there at Leichhardt Oval this week, and hopefully we get through that because the grand final is at CommBank Stadium the following weekend.
You got to make the final then, right? Sure, you're getting the home field advantage for a Jersey Flegg final. Incredibly rare privilege, and this team certainly has the potential to do it. And I know Penrith last year won the ball and flag as well as the other two titles, Cup and the most important one, Premiership in the NRL. But looking at the teams that Penrith ran out in the ball and flag that season, the way the Eels are constructed this season, I think they'll essentially have double the amount of ball players contributing to the prospective premiership should they get there. So very, very cool if they can get it done.
Yeah, absolutely true. And just on the Eels' performance in that return game at Ringrose, it would have been the end of the season for the Eels had they lost that. I mean, that's how critical that win was without a number of star players. But they got the job done. They got it done impressively, and that kept their season alive. And of course, as we know, they had to have things go their way in the final round because they needed the Raiders to beat the Storm to upset the Storm in the other match. Plus, they needed to beat the Panthers themselves.
That for those that weren't playing along at home, the absolute chaos, because our game finished before the Melbourne-Canberra game, and we were scoreboard watching on the app and seeing the scorers get it wrong and credit the Storm with the try, and we was going on. Oh no, it was hand in heads, like, you know, actual funeral sort of atmosphere. And then you refresh the page, like, oh my god, they got it wrong. You know, the Raiders scored. So yeah, when you look back, and maybe they win the premiership, and you know we all get to go crazy there. But you look back at that one moment where they did their end of the deal, but you know had to rely on not a huge upset, but because the Raiders were, you know, in terms of the competition ladder, close to both the Eels and the Storm, but a huge upset in the context of travelling down to Melbourne and winning that game. Yeah, crazy cstuff.
And for those who hadn't seen the footage of what happened at the end of that game, it was 16 all. It was 16 all after the Raiders had led 16-0 at half time from memory, wasn't it, John?
They were up 16-0. They were up 16-0. We were down, I think, 12-0, 10-0, I think. So the two results are going entirely the wrong way. We stormed back in the second half. Well, you know, Penrith couldn't touch us, and then we were looking at the thing like, oh no, the Storm are back 16-4, 16-10, 16-6. 16 all. Sorry, they didn't lose points. But no, yeah, it was going right into the sort of territory of heartbreak, and then, you know, at the end where it looked like they'd managed to break our hearts, and then there was a scorer's error. So yeah, what a crazy ride it's been.
That last play, as I said, if people hadn't seen it, so there's like about 90 seconds left in the game, and the Raiders had set for a field goal. Now, what everyone has to remember is that the result was a matter of pride for the Raiders in that game. So the Raiders were desperate. They wouldn't have had the same level of desperation. It was a matter of pride. It would have been a win that they would have enjoyed. But if it had played out as a draw, as a 16-all draw, that would have also been good enough for the Storm.
Yep.
And you would have thought, you know, like, are the Raiders going to be desperate for a win, or are they going to be happy with the draw as well? Anyway, comes back, they set up for the field goal. The Storm sort of get out and thwart them being able to take a field goal. So the play heads right of the posts, and there's a grubber kick that's put in towards the corner, and it evades all of the players, and one of the Raiders chasers managed to get his hand on the ball, I would suggest maybe half a metre from the corner of the in goal. So for half a metre in from the sideline, half a metre from the dead ball line, and he gets his hand onto the ball. And I'm sure that the footy gods were very, very kind to the Eels in that particular match, you'd have to say. So, okay, it's time for our predictions, fellas. So we want the score, we want the first try scorer for the Eels, and we want the best on field. Clint, you go first.
Ooh, I think this will be a tight one. The Roosters are a good attacking outfit, but I still see our boys prevailing. I'm going to say 26-18. My first try scorer, I'm going to go a little bit left of centre here. I'm going to back our 5'8" Josh Lynn. And our man of the match, I'm going to back his halves partner, Ethan Sanders, to kick us home to victory.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I'll go Parramatta to win 28-20. First try scorer, Blaze Talangi, who will also be right in the mix for man of the match, but I will go... How about Jock Brazel, man of the match? Big game from the captain.
Okay, well, I'm going to go for a 34-20 victory for the Eels. I think we've got the points in us, and if we can restrict the opposition to 20 or less, it pretty much would guarantee a win. I see first try score. Oh, you know what? I think we're going to hit an edge. It could be, yeah, look, I'm going to go for Jock Brazel to be the first try scorer. And best on field, I reckon Budsy Arthur will have a big one in this. So I'll take him for best on field in the game. Okay, fellas, we now move to the NRLW. John, can you take us through the team list there? I don't think we've got any changes. So.
No changes, which means, as per the program last week against the Titans, Church at fullback, Faye and Hunt on the wings, Tui and Toi Hiku, the young centre pairing. In the halves, it's Pahuka Berryman Duff and Rachel Pearson, the captain, or co-captain now, Kennedy Cherrington's back. You got O'Neill and Amiatu in the front row with Ruben Cherrington at dummy half. In the back row, Amelia Murphy, Mahalia Murphy, and the aforementioned Kennedy Cherrington. On the bench, Tanaka Todd Hunter, Noraria Kapua, Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis, and Jade Vanua. Extended roster, Davis Welsh, Donovan Jones, Simon, and Payakau. They're taking on the Cronulla Sharks out at GIO Stadium. This is a Parramatta home game, one of the two home games that they had to take to very Western Sydney venues in Cogra and Canberra. And yeah, looking to finish the season with the win, potentially dodging that wooden spoon, like you said, Sixties, with a big win and then a big loss to the Cowboys in those two matches. I don't think that has to be in their minds at all. You get the wooden spoon, you cop it, you own it, and look for getting the win in this game by any other means.
Now, there are a number of very familiar faces in this Cronulla Sharks team, mate.
Yeah, I think I count, depending on, I'm not sure if it was like a name change, but I counted 6 former Eels there. Penatani, Preston, Johnston, Foliaki, Naitoka Toka, Anderson, Harada Butler.
Yep.
That's not Rima Butler, is it? She's at Newcastle, wasn't she?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that wasn't like another name for Rima. So if that's the case, we've got 6 Eels in the top 17. Maddie Stutton, also in the extended roster there, and Fatafehi Hanisi, who I believe is the sister of Philomena, who was an Eel, but Fatafehi wasn't herself. She wasn't graded as a Parramatta Eel. So lots of blue and gold in the sky blue, white and black of the Sharks there. And it could add a little bit of spice to this one, boys. I don't know if it's going to lead to some confrontations, but we know that Kennedy certainly won't back down from any extracurriculars that have been doled out in this game. And, yeah, I wonder if there'll be just a little bit of feeling here.
Yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts about, Clint, about Tonegado playing at 5'8" rather than at fullback?
Yeah, look, it's a funny one because Cronulla are in the NRLW in a position that some NRL teams are. I think of someone like the Titans in this instance, where they've got 2 grade capable fullbacks in their squad, and they're trying to make them both work. That being for the Cronulla side, Jada Taylor and Emma Tonegado. But it'll be interesting to see what that does. Obviously, they're trying to get their best runners handling the ball as much as possible and getting as many touches as possible. And for some teams it does work. For other teams, it creates disharmony and a disjointed attacking line. How it'll unfold, I don't know, but it is something of interest to note. And given the challenges our girls have had defensively, and I touched on before in the previous performance against the Titans, there's definitely some poor efforts there. I'd say that puts our defensive line on high alert that she's there.
Yeah, absolutely. John, how do you see this match playing out?
Yeah, I think we enter in as underdogs between the fact that we're running with 1 win in the season and it's not a home game for us, so there is no venue advantage. In saying that, there is a lot of talent in this team. I think that the wheels have fallen off a little bit in the last 2 weeks, taking on one of the 2 best teams in competition in the Roosters, and then one of the most improved teams in the competition in the Titans, who are going to go to the finals as well. So you mentioned it before, but they've got to stop getting inside their own heads of these errors. If you make the mistake, aim up. Don't drop your heads. They need to stop arm grabbing, need to show a bit of line speed, a bit of physicality. It's one game left in the season. You've got nothing left to hold back. Go out there and play some good football. So, go out there, get the ball to Toi Hiku, get the ball to Zoe Fay, get Tyler Amiatu involved in some different looks, not just running north-south, but get Ruben Cherrington to turn it back inside under the ruck and, try and isolate defenders inside the red zone. The Sharks are going to be pretty solid. I think they're a good team, not a great team, but a good team. And, I think there will be a little bit of feeling in this one just because of the amount of ex-Eels across the Sharks lineup. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I feel like we've got a couple of girls that love to play with their hair on fire in Kennedy in particular, but also her sister Ruben. We've got a few girls that seem to be a little bit more passive in that regard, so that could either put them out of the game or maybe it could be an ignition catalyst for them. So, I don't know. Just all I want to see them is go out there and play hard for the full duration of this game because they've got nothing else left in the season. Finish on a high, set yourselves up in 2024.
Clint, anything to add?
Only that I can echo 40 sentiments there. When it's your last match of the season and there's literally nothing else there to lose, you go for it, and you try and create some momentum to take with you into the next season. That's what the men's side did with a very comprehensive victory, an unexpected victory of the Panthers. Hopefully the girls can do the same this weekend.
Yeah. So, well, as for me, I'm just hoping that we can get the errors cut down. I mean, I don't know that it's far too late in the season. I think that we can expect that the defence is going to change too much. We just haven't defended well enough all season and certainly haven't defended well off the errors. So the first step is turn the ball over on our terms, which means, a kick into the corner, a bit of defensive pressure, making it hard for an opposition team to get off the line rather than allowing them to get on the front foot really quickly off an error. And I think that's going to go a long way towards giving the Eels a better chance of taking victory. I think that they can find a victory against the Sharks as opponents. I looked at their form against the Dragons last week, and I wouldn't say it was anything to write home about at all. I don't know that it was a particularly high standard game. It had its exciting moments, but it also had some ordinary moments. So I think that a win is possible. So I guess now we talk about our predictions, John. So scoreline, first try scorer for the Eels and best on field.
Yeah, look, I think if we win, it'll be tight. So I'll go 24-22. First try scorer, Tyler Amiatu. Best on field. Again, with my Blaze Tully prediction, I think that Tyler will probably be right in the running for it. But I will go for best on field with, well, she's been the best player for the Eels all season, so I'll go Cassie Toi Hiku.
Okay, Clint.
I'm gonna channel all my positive energy in this one. I'm going to say that there will be a tight Eels victory of 26-24. I'm going to say Rachel Pearson, player of the match, and like John, I'm backing Cassie Toi Hiku to be the first try scorer.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with an Eels victory. I think it is possible, and I think for the Eels, I think that it will be Kennedy Cherrington as the best on field in an 18-16 victory, and first try scorer. I'm going to go for that Pearson Hunt combination, and see Kimberly Hunt scoring off a Rachel Pearson kick. Okay, that now brings us to NRL news. So anyone, if you'd like to put us on pause and go and grab a coffee, now would be a good point. We're probably a little bit past halfway. We haven't got quite as many things to discuss in the NRL news and NRLW news. Okay, I imagine you've got your coffee and you're ready to go now. So let's start off by talking about the NRL purchasing property next to Shark Park. Fellas, it's what the NRL closely aligning themselves with the Sharks here. Is that a take we can have there? I mean, we know that the NRL are looking at establishing a property portfolio and looking at diversifying their income stream, at protecting their future with assets. But the article today with that also said that Volandis was all in with helping the Sharks to secure funding for a centre of excellence and stadium upgrade. And we do have a point of difference to discuss when it comes to the NRL involvement with a stadium upgrade at Shark Park. Clint, I'll let you lead off here.
Yeah, there's a bit going on with this one, isn't there? I found it a little bit strange seeing this news break today. You know, obviously encourage the NRL to diversify their asset pool to ensure the longevity and the financial security of the game. Because the fact of the matter is, through the media deal that the NRL signs with the respective media agencies that televise and broadcast the game, that's where a lot of the revenue for NRL clubs comes from. So diversifying their assets and creating other financial, other streams of income is incredibly important for the organisation to do, because it means that they're not reliant on any one given source of funding. That being said, very interesting that the Sharks, as one of the intellectual properties, I guess, of the NRL, now have. I'm going to use the term here loosely, but whether you want to call them father or big brother coming in and buying an asset right next door to their stadium, and then likewise Volandi's comments around potential funding of an upgrade there, which we noted last week in the conversation when we were talking about fans being shut out from the Sharks Roosters semi by virtue of the 13,000 capacity Shark Park ground hosting a semi-final over the Sydney Football Stadium that is privately owned. And there's been a lot of money that's been flying around for the better part of the last 2 to 3 years through the New South Wales Office of Sports Centre of Excellence funding and matching of money for projects around a number of clubs. The Eels are a club who were approved in that and are currently building their Centre of Excellence out at Kellyville Park. Clubs like the Tigers, also I believe the Dragons are a club at the moment who are still to build theirs down in the University of Wollongong. We've seen the Roosters as a part of their stadium deal, which is a government-owned asset at Moore Park, get a Centre of Excellence built into that. Likewise, we've got the Rabbitohs, who earlier this year opened up their Centre of Excellence at Heffron Park through that program. But again, noting that all of these assets were community/government owned at some point. You got the Sharks, who are one of 2 NRL clubs, the other being the Dolphins, that privately own their stadium. So you got to wonder if this is maybe like a Manly sort of deal in which they look to build a grandstand, a Centre of Excellence into a grandstand build at the stadium. You can kind of make a case for that, I guess, given that the Centre of Excellence funding scheme only you had to be part of a national sporting organisation, which obviously the NRL is, and that qualified. But it's also worth noting that there was 2 rounds of that funding, and the opportunity to provide a submission for the second round of funding ceased at the beginning of this year. So they would have to the NRL would have to be doing some serious lobbying if these are the strings that are attached to this deal. And Likewise, if this is also a part of the greater plan they have down there, and why they acquired the hotel in the first place. So, there might be two things here at play, and the stories being conveniently connected and joined together here. I suspect that that's likely the case. But if this is sort of a conditional purpose and that it's being used as leverage to try and do some things around the box, well, you have to ask the question of whether the Sharks are getting an unfair benefit here and trying to enter through the back door, per se.
Well, I don't have a problem with the NRL lobbying the government for funding for a centre of excellence for the Sharks, because other teams have been able to get that, and I think that's perfectly fine. Where I have an issue is that the Sharks' home ground, Shark Park, or whatever sponsor name it has, is owned by the Sharks. Now, look, full credit to them historically that they own their own ground. They have an asset that other clubs have either not had the foresight or the opportunity to have, and they deserve credit for that. However, they can't go cap in hand for public money, government money, to pump into a privately owned asset for which they would get the revenue. So when there is matches that are held there, they don't have stadium leasing costs involved in that. If they stage concerts at Shark Park, if they host other sports events as a result of an upgrade, the money goes to the Sharks. They own the ground. It is their asset. If there is a couple of $100 million spent on a ground there, that is handing over a couple of $100 million to the Sharks organisation. It's something that's not done with other clubs. The other clubs that have benefited from a stadium upgrade don't own their ground. They're a council asset or a government-owned asset. So the way that I see it, and John, I'll come to you for your thoughts on this. I see that the only way that the NRL can get involved with lobbying for ground improvements to Shark Park is if either A, it involves the government buying the ground and spending money so it becomes a public asset, and in which case, obviously, it's right there next to the Sharks Leagues Club, and it's in their spiritual home, so they still benefit there. And they would get the money for the purchase of the land and the stadium as it currently exists, or the NRL does the same. The NRL buys the ground and upgrades it themselves. Now, they haven't got the funds to do that, so we know that's not going to happen. All right, John, is there any? Am I too harsh in this opinion?
No, it's an awkward situation for the Cronulla Sharks. In that owning their own stadium is also a curse as much as it is a blessing, because there is no incentive for the state government or the federal government to chip in and upgrade the stadium, because it's not going to, it's not helping a community resource become better. CommBank Stadium is the home of the Parramatta Eels, but it's also the home of the Wanderers, Rugby Union, all sorts of local grade football. The Jersey Flegg we just mentioned, they're going to be playing a grand final out of CommBank Stadium. That's not NRL. I know it is connected to NRL, but it's not, strictly speaking, NRL. There's a lot of stuff that happens.
No, they'll be hiring the venue.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's a lot of stuff that happens with these facilities and these upgrades by virtue of them being a state or federal property or whatever body, the entity or body that stadium. It's like what is the thing? It's like there's a stadium's corporational body that looks after them. But yeah, that's a huge, plus for the government and the body controlling it to upgrade it for those sort of things. And that's why the Sharks find themselves in a very precarious position. Yeah, and I don't know what their course of action is from here. The NRL can't sponsor the upgrades, because once you do that, you're gonna have all other 17. How many clubs are out now? 16, 17. So all the other 16,
16 other clubs,
16 other clubs coming knocking on the door saying, "Hang on, what about us? We've got more fans to serve." Because Cronulla, they might not like hearing, but they're one of the smaller teams. They've got a smaller fan base. There's a reason why their name is always up as one of the relocation candidates, right? So if you're looking after Cronulla, then why aren't you looking after all these other places? So I don't know. It is odd that the government, the NRL, picked a Cronulla-based investment property first, but maybe we're reading too much into it.
Yeah, well, I don't think we'll be reading too much into it if they get involved with getting a stadium upgrade and public funding is used for a private upgrade. I don't think anyone will be happy with that. Now, Clint, you've got some breaking news that and this is completely off our run sheet for tonight, but it's literally just come through as we're recording. Can you take us through some of this breaking news?
Yeah, a story that's been broken by Michael Chammas from the Sydney Morning Herald highlights that the last right of negotiation clause, or better known as the 10-day cooling off period, is set to return to player contract negotiations. And I'm just going to take our listeners through exactly what that means. But every player must provide his incumbent club with the last right of negotiation for a 10-day period from the day of notice that the player has received an offer from a rival club. And that offer has been submitted to the NRL, that he is prepared to accept it. And in order to give effect to this clause, A, the player must provide notice to his incumbent club that he has an offer that he will accept in 10 days' time, subject to negotiations with his incumbent club. B, the club can then engage in contract negotiations with the player for a period for up to 10 days, or the club may waive its rights in writing, at which point the player is free to sign with the rival club. C, the offer from the rival NRL club must be an official offer and submitted to the NRL salary cap auditor, the contents of which will remain confidential, but the NRL salary cap auditor can provide verification to the incumbent club that an offer has been received. That offer must remain open for acceptance for a minimum of 14 days or for at least 48 hours beyond the expiry of the 10-day negotiation period with the incumbent club, and that there's no requirement for the player to disclose the terms of that offer to his incumbent club. And D, at the expiry of the 10 days, the player may sign or reject the offer from the rival club. Gents, I know I threw a lot out there, and listeners, I hope you're able to keep up with that, but geez, this sounds like we're opening Pandora's box here again. And, everyone would probably remember the infamous negotiation of Daly Cherry Evans accepting an offer to go to the Gold Coast Titans, only to renege on that offer and accept the $10 million lifetime contract with Manly. Also ourselves, I think it was back in 2013 when Ricky Stewart was coach of the Eels, Josh Papali'i agreeing to terms and then utilizing the 10-day cooling off period to pull out of his deal with Parramatta. Are we opening Pandora's box and giving a bit too much power back to player agents here?
I think we always have an issue when there is power that's exercised by player agents. Do I have a problem with the formality of the contracts? Probably in this instance, no. But there was one part that I was interested in, which was the receipt of the offer by the salary cap auditor. Now, Is that a change? Is that a change? And if so, does that mean that the auditor has to verify that the offer is above board and is within and keeps the club who's made the offer, that they have stayed within the salary cap in making such an offer? And in which case is that I'd love it if that was the case, because I'm sick of clubs that go ahead and sign players on inflated contracts that are above their salary cap, and their main goal being, okay, we just want to get this person on board. then we'll work out the details of who we have to release in order to keep them.
Yeah, I'd be very interested. Not that we'd ever would, but what were the motivations behind this change? Like you said, it feels like this might be as much a chance to maybe address some clubs complaining about not, being able to match offers fairly, and some agents going behind their backs and signing players before they had a chance to officially, going behind their backs, make contracts official before they had a proper chance to, give a counter offer. I feel like that might also be a response to some skullduggery going on with these dodgy offers, and like you said, sort of dealing with cap fallout later. Very interested to see if we hear any more about that, because this feels like it's addressing multiple issues, not just the one where usually it's players complaining or clubs complaining about not being able to have a right of last reply, which is definitely something here. But yeah, the fact that that was mentioned feels like there was a point of emphasis there.
Yeah. So Clint, yes, it could be a Pandora's box, but I think it's a case of the devil's in the detail. And if we get more detail, that we can put our teeth into, such as what is the involvement of the salary cap auditor, I think that may well be, if the salary cap auditor is looking at the legitimacy and the compliance of clubs in their offers, keeping them within the salary cap, then I'm all for it. Anyway, we move on. Fellas, I wanted to touch quickly on the NRLW finalists, which they're almost close to being determined now. It all depends on a couple of matches, and primarily the Raiders match with the Titans. If the Titans win that, the Titans stay in the top four, and the Raiders miss out. Now, if that does transpire, that means that none of the new franchises will qualify for finals football. And I think we pretty much thought that would be the case at the start of the season. We may not have got the clubs correct that were going to qualify, because I think we were hoping that the Eels were going to be, and maybe thought that the Eels would qualify for finals football. That hasn't panned out. But we have got the current premiers in the Knights. We've got the Roosters, the Broncos, and at this stage the Titans being in the top four. So, is any thoughts there? Has it just simply been that the established clubs have had that greater, even though there's been a lot of turnover of rosters, that they've had the advantage of being an established club in the NRLW?
Yeah, I think the expansion clubs probably recruited better this time around than the last batch, which was us, Newcastle. And I know Newcastle would go on to win a premiership in their third season? Second season. Sorry. But initially they struggled, but they had big recruits in the same year, but the season after, with Millie Boyle and Tamika Upton, I think, coming on board in that second wave. So they did really well there. But I feel like Cronulla and Canberra were very well put together rosters. Cronulla obviously benefiting from having a New South Wales Rugby League Havanom's win premiership team, and Canberra just recruiting really well. And I don't think the Cowboys are that bad either. So I don't think it's a knock on the way they went about doing things. I just think that at the very top end of town, there are some very good teams. Obviously, the Newcastle Knights are looking to run it back, and they're looking not unbeatable, but they did knock off the Roosters just then, and they're a very good squad. And the Roosters themselves are just a crazy squad, as we've talked about before. So yeah, I think just the top of town is very heavy in the NRLW, and the other teams, there's a lot of haves and have-nots in general, not just for the expansion teams.
Yeah, well, I wanted to now touch on the standard of the NRLW, so I want to come to you, Clint, with this one. What did you think of the standard of finals football in week one?
For the men's, you mean?
Yeah.
The game on Sunday was probably a little bit of a save face for the NRL, given that it was a close, tight encounter with a lot of drama, a lot of things that happened in that game. And as a neutral fan, it was a good spectacle. But at the same time, the two sides that were playing, and I know Newcastle's been on a hot streak, so I might not win myself any favours with Newcastle supporters here when I say this, but I didn't think either team played overly well in that game. It was just a highly competitive, entertaining game that was a good watch for a neutral. The other three games, the results felt like they were always coming. And look, I know that the Roosters only won by 1 point, but geez, that was a dour affair as well. And I think
I thought it was awful. I thought it was an awful game.
It was, if I'm brutally honest, I was channel flicking when that game was on. I was just not interested in the slightest, to be honest. I was keeping up with the score, but I wasn't interested in keeping my eyes fixated on the game. You had the qualifying finals, the 1v4 and 2v3. Geez, there were two blowout scores, and I know going into the semis, both Penrith and the Broncos are the two outstanding candidates, given that they both finished on the same amount of points, and it obviously went down to the last round to determine the minor premiers. But they look leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the competition at the minute, and it kind of feels like a fait accompli that they will be the grand finalists. And again, I've got to be honest, gents, it kind of feels like a very weak final series that's ultimately going to play out here. I'll be very surprised if the bookies' favourites aren't the results that ultimately unfold. And look, I know that it's a bit rich for us to say, given we didn't have a great end of year and ultimately missed out on the finals, but you kind of wonder if the Rabbitohs, Eels, and Cowboys happen to be there, whether some of these games might have been a little bit more tight, or because the reason I bring them up, because you got they're preliminary finalists from last year, and certainly provided a much better final spectacle over the course of the final series than the likes of the Raiders, Sharks, Knights, Roosters, and dare I say what the Warriors and Storm put up against their opponents. So, look,
Clint,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, much has been made about the Eels in the past, about the Eels finals record, and what the Sharks have won one of their last 9 finals appearances, I believe.
Yeah, it's not a good record, and to be perfectly honest, they didn't have a better opportunity to win a finals game than they did against the Roosters.
Yeah,
they were injury
decimated.
ravaged. They had a player in the thin bin. They had all the running with attack, and I know Blake Brayley had a moment where he went the wrong side of the ruck, but it was prime opportunity in front of a home crowd for Nico Hines to stand up and make a statement. And Mitchell Moses was much maligned for supposedly not doing that. And, I think we remember that elimination semi that we played against Newcastle a couple of years ago, where he took the game by the scruff of the neck and absolutely said, "I'm the man, give me the ball." Scored that great solo try, stamped his authority on that game. And we all, the scoreline suggested it was a little bit closer than what the game actually felt and how it unfolded. He dominated that game and really asserted himself as a player of finals football caliber. And Nico Hines had the same opportunity on Saturday night, just wasn't able to do that. And the talk that the Eels have had experienced much up until those moments, and much up until Mitch had taken the opportunity to assert himself, doesn't seem to be following the Sharks around as much as it did our Parramatta boys.
John, just given the standard of finals football, is it fair to say that the Broncos-Panthers grand final looks a certainty at this stage?
Oh, I mean, I feel like you'd be a crazy man or woman to be betting against it. Like you said, Quinn said it was like a fait accompli. There's a sense of inevitability about it, isn't there? Like, they're the two best teams by some margin. And again, not to pump our own tires up given how poorly we finished the season, but it really feels like we were probably the only team, and maybe the Rabbitohs, that could have challenged. And the Rabbitohs obviously had plenty of internal issues that have come to the forefront since. And the Eels, well, even if they got into the finals, they would have been without Quinton Gufferson and probably without Mitchell Moses for at least a game. So there was no real way they were going to be able to challenge. But yeah, they're by far the two best teams in the competition. And it's not just that. it feels like the other teams that are all punching above their weight right now. Newcastle, obviously, but the Warriors too, and the Roosters, who have they've been nearly as hot as Newcastle, not as hot, but now have just an absolute litany of injuries. So if they win this week, it'd be incredible. Let alone getting into the grand final. And yeah, I don't know. It feels like a disproportionately weighted season with the Roosters, the Broncos, and the Panthers being by far the best teams. And I think Brisbane can challenge Penrith when it comes to that one game. I know that they beat them earlier in the season, but that was like round 1 or round 2, and there's a lot of change since then. But the Broncos have got a very good team. They've got a lot of tough players and a lot of electric players headlined by Reece Walsh. And yeah, I just don't see the other teams getting close to them. I think the Warriors' best chance to get to a grand final was, and I know that was somewhat out of their hands if Johnson being injured, was playing Johnson in that first week and getting the week off. Obviously that the football gods thought otherwise of him having the injury, but I felt like for them to do that, they needed the week off now. And yeah, I don't know if they've got the same. When Parramatta did it last year after losing to Penrith, you looked at the rest of the field and the way Parramatta played the game, and it really felt like only Penrith really were the problem. Like, I know the Cowboys pushed us hard up in Townsville. That was the benefit of having a home game there for them. But in terms of like pure, like, can we take them? It was really only Penrith. And you look at the rest of those teams, and all the ones below those top two are kind of in the same field, and they're definitely 2 steps behind the top two. So yeah, I can't see anything but those two on grand final day.
Yeah, and we also have those number of teams. You touched on the injury to Sean Johnson. You've got the injuries to both the Storm and the Roosters. You have to think that it almost makes it an impossible task for some of those clubs. And we've just had news come through as we record as well that Wighton has been found guilty of that biting charge and been suspended for 3 weeks. Any surprise there, Clint? Is that what you expected?
I certainly expected a suspension. I thought it might have been a little bit longer than 3 weeks, but Jack Wighton, as he's now going to find himself affectionately known as when he ends up at the at South Sydney next year, is probably a little bit lucky that it wasn't longer. It's normally when an incident is referred directly to the judiciary, you're expecting over a month's suspension. So to end up with 3 weeks, he should probably go buy himself a lotto ticket.
Incredibly lucky.
John, do you think that the defence was able to get any leverage with their claims that he was put into quite a severe headlock that forced his mouth onto the arm of the Knights player, who was it from memory now?
The 5'8" Gamble.
Tyson Gamble.
Yeah,
that's it.
So
yeah, Gamble. So
the problem with that piece of theoretical physics that they tried to use as a defense is that if he was forcing his arm into his head with that sort of directional force and it was as powerful as it was, it'd be pulling your jaw away, not in. So there'd be no impetus to be biting on the player. You'd need someone else coming on behind the back of the head to push it back down to be biting or to generate the same sort of force as biting. So, look, I think Jack got caught in a lie and tried the safe face. And look, there's no doubt that Gamble had his hands around there, and it could have been quite a grapple tackle. I don't think it was a vicious grapple tackle in the context of like the sort of Melbourne Storm era grapple. But yeah, look, it's going to follow him. I hope it follows him, because biting and eye gouging is something that there should be no place for in the game. But in light of that, how do you give a 3-week suspension? If he is guilty of biting, then sit him down for 10 weeks. Like, mate, again, the code has got ass backwards of the way it hands out punishments. Like, Kennedy Charrington is rubbed out for half a season. Fair enough. I don't take issue with that in isolation. What I do take issue with is when you see worse tackles in the NRL getting much lesser punishments, relatively speaking, to the duration of the NRL season, and stuff like biting and eye gouging being made almost a joke of. The Canberra player that played Origin this year, Hudson Young, how many times did he eye gouge before he copped a suspension? Same thing here with Jack Wighton. You know, there is no place for this in the game. Stamp it out. If he is guilty, you cannot give him a 3-week suspension. So just that's crazy to me. And and like Quint said, hopefully this follows him around because this is something he should have to wear for the rest of his career.
Yep.
I
Okay.
might just add to that as well, John. Your beautiful description there of the physics behind the biting motion absolutely echoed shades of magic bullet John F. Kennedy assassination theory there. I think, or the magic loogie if you're a Seinfeld fan listening. I thought it just did not make sense that was an acceptable.
It was there. That was like that O.J. Simpson thing, wasn't it? If the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit. It's like the grapple, made him bite. No, it didn't.
Back and to the left. Back and to the left. Is that the way Tyson Gamble's? Jack Wighton's head twisted? Was it back and to the left?
Kind of, yeah. It probably was actually. Thinking about the replay now, it probably was back and to the left.
Lee Harvey Oswald was actually at the top of the Andrew John stand, and he was the sole reason that Tyson Gamble's arm was actually, or Jack Wighton's head, I should say, actually moved there. So you know what, CIA, you've got a job on your hands now.
Yeah. Okay, fellas, we're at the stage now where it's tip time. We've got the Storm against the Roosters, two teams hit hard by injury. Quickly, the tips on these. John, first of all, the Storm and the Roosters.
If the Roosters hadn't come into this game absolutely whipped by the injury bug, I think they were actually a chance here. I think Melbourne have been very substandard. I think that they're there to be beaten. But goodness, like they lost Swaliti, they lost Manu, they lost the poor bloke that's always injured, Billy Smith. Is it Billy Smith?
Smith.
Yeah. They absolutely cursed. And, I've got no love for the Roosters, but you can't help but feel at least a little bit bad for them in light of what we're seeing. And, I think Melbourne will do it, but I don't have a lot of faith in Melbourne. And I also am not sure that the winner is making up any sort of weight in the competition from here.
Yeah, I mean, here's the Roosters 3 quarters. So you got Palga, Momirovski, Allen, and Barlow. That's their 3 quarters.
Momirovski's a premiership winner.
Yeah.
But is he playing his first game of the season?
I think so because he had the massive concussion problems earlier this year. So yeah.
So Clint, who are you taking in this one?
Oh, every day of the week and twice on Sunday, Melbourne. And I don't say that, as John very rightly touched on this. It's not as though they've been in fantastic form themselves. They're right for the picking. But the fact of the matter is, no matter who wins this game, they're going to be cannon fodder for the Panthers next week. So
absolutely.
It's just
it would be an all-time upset for whoever gets out of this one to knock over the Panthers. Like legitimately an all-timer.
It'd be such an all-timer that it's an impossibility. Storm to win this for mine, and of course we also have the Warriors taking on the Knights over there in New Zealand. John, who's going to win that?
This one's...
Is it as simple as it revolving around Sean Johnson playing or not playing?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge part of it. Look, Newcastle didn't play good football against the Raiders, and they were lucky to get away with it.
Yep.
I don't think we're stating anything crazy there. I do think they can cause the Warriors some problems though. That loss of the Panthers, Sean Johnson being under a bit of an injury cloud. I think there's talk that he's going to have they're going to give him until Friday to prove his fitness. I don't know if they're foxing or if there actually are concerns about that injury. So I'm going to tip the upset here. I imagine it's the upset. I'm going to go with the Newcastle Knights to win this one, although this is a very difficult game to pick.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's the upset, especially if Sean Johnson doesn't play. But I'm I'm going to agree with you there, and I'm going to assume Johnson doesn't play, and I'll tip the Knights. If Sean Johnson does play, I reverse that decision and I take Johnson. Clint, anything different to add?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same, gents. The caveat is Johnson, and he plays, it swings at the Warriors. He doesn't, it swings at Newcastle. But I might just add, who at the beginning of this year tipped a week 2 finals game being
Knights
played in New
Warriors.
Zealand with the Warriors against the Knights? That must have been on no one's NRL bingo card this year.
Confidence is everything in this
wasn't
game.
on mine.
Yeah,
wasn't on mine.
Yeah, I am worried for Newcastle though, in that kind of a la Parramatta 09. There's a lot of players for them that are probably going to earn new contracts. That there's a fierce regression to the mean coming next year, and you're going to be end up with not historically bad contracts, but just guys that probably shouldn't be resigned, getting resigned.
And to that point as well, they're they're not they're a side that I guess, as you're suggesting there, John, that they're probably overperforming at the moment, and I don't see this as the type of form that's sustainable. And their opponents, knowing that they've been capable of this form this year, the Knights might have been a side that you weren't as an opposition as up for previously. Now now when you have this type of form, when you win 10 in a row, you draw the attention of opposition coaches, and they're more likely to get their teams or playing their opposition. The Knights, this is playing their opposition in an up week.
Yeah, look, I see this, and I don't mean to disrespect Newcastle with it, but I do see this as an anomalous season.
Agreed.
My early tip would be Newcastle don't make finals football next year, but again there'll be the caveat of the draw, because the Canberra team should never have made the finals this year. They are an awful team with an awful differential that represents how their season has gone. The Sharks have benefited from easier draws as well,
for 3 seasons now.
Yeah, so it's that draw is it just plays into the hand of a team or two every year that are able to qualify and probably don't deserve to qualify, and it's normally evident in the performance in final football, and certainly the differential through the season. Well, fellas, that brings us to the end of our podcast. Just a reminder to our listeners that we will be continuing with the once a week podcast where we throw in a little bit of a review, team list Tuesday, and preview and news all into one podcast. Thank you to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and also to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta. Our thanks as well to all of you for listening. Thank you, John. Thank you, Clint. And let's hope for a big weekend from our two teams that are still competing, the Jersey Flegg team in their quest to get into next week's grand final in the Jersey Flegg competition, and also to the NRLW team in their final match of the season. And what else can I say but go you mighty Eels.